I'm Justin Davis, and this is Drone Camps RC. What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Justin Davis, and today we're going to 3D print some drones. We're going to go outside and fly it, see how it does, how it performs right here on the Alfawise U20. It is a new 3D printer out on the market. It is another branded GearBest item, and I'm going to see how it performs versus the probably crowd favorite CR10S. It is directly a competitor to this printer, so we're going to check it out, see how it does on the bench, and we're also going to fly some race drones today. So let's go out to the field real quick. After that, we'll come back in and do a full review of the Alfawise U20. Skywatch.Ai insurance is on demand, and anytime you need it, check out the link below. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the field. I'm pretty happy today because I built this 3D printed race quad just this morning. I actually took a couple hours this morning to put this together. It's not super complicated. It does only have 4 parts to it in total. 2 front pieces, a top plate, and this bottom plate. The bottom plate is super thick. It looks like it might be pretty durable. I did print it out of PETG, so I should have a nice structure on the end of the arms, and it shouldn't break off hopefully when I hit the ground. It does have a nice honeycomb inside, and I printed this about 20% infill, so I'm hoping that this flies really well because I did a little bit of a line of sight flight test with it in my backyard and just hovered it, and it hovers really nice, and the motors sound really smooth and quiet. So I'm expecting a pretty good performance out of it, and it does have a spot for a battery on top or a GoPro, or you could put your battery on the bottom. But he also gives you 2 different options for mounting on here, actually 3. You get a 30 by 30 mounting point, 20 by 20 mounting point, and a dual layer 20 by 20 stacks if you wanted to put 20 in the back and a 20 mount up front, so you could do side by side. So a lot of options with this frame, and you can run micro cams on here, so looking pretty sweet. After the break, we'll come back and we'll do a little flying with this, and then we'll go into the studio and check out this Alfawise, sort of like a CR10 type of competitor 3D printer. Here we go. All right, let's go ahead and get this guy off the ground. This is called the Birdbone, and I'm definitely going to try to put a link down below for you guys. Super simple frame to build. You can order the parts for it. I'll try to list some of the parts down below for this particular build, the way I did it. Now I'm going to go ahead and arm it, and the quad is going to be in air mode. So that means if I get to the bottom of the stick, I'm still going to have some throttle. Just playing around with some pitch bumps here. And the power to weight ratio feels insane. It feels really awesome. I think this is going to fly probably just as good as any bind and fly racer out there. If you're on a budget and you're trying to build something and you already have a 3D printer, guys get really into these. There's some forums on Facebook you can get into. There's tons of different frames out there, micro brushless style frames, full on 5-inch frames, and even some larger camera drones that you can 3D print. So you can go crazy with your 3D printer if you want to print something to fly. Now this thing is super maneuverable. I'm going to try to list the parts down below for you guys if you want to do this exact build. The guy that made this one made several different iterations of this Birdbone frame, and I believe this is one of his latest editions. Look at that. I have total control with this, and it feels a lot like something I would have bought, and it might actually fly better than some of the stuff that I've recently reviewed and bought. So to be able to print this frame for about, I don't know, maybe 25 cents worth of material is kind of wild. And the bottom plate takes 5 hours to print, which is actually pretty low amount of time for considering how much material is used. And the Alfawise does a really good job of printing in PETG, which if you're going to print this frame, I would recommend that you print it out of ABS. It's just going to be a little bit stronger. There's also some new filament coming out that I'm going to experiment, and I'm going to let you guys know a little bit more about that coming up on the channel. I've got some other printers here to review, so I'm going to keep printing out frames and playing around and experimenting with 3D printed quads on the Drone Camps channel, because they are a lot of fun, and they're actually simple to build once you get your frames all printed out. It's just getting the printer dialed into the right settings and getting your infill correct. That's going to be the trick. But this is looking pretty good. It's flying as good as something that I would have bought from any hobby store or overseas, so I'm really happy with the way this flies line of sight. Now I'm interested to see how this is going to do in FPV. This is going to be a lot of fun. Here we go. Let's get it off the ground again. And I bought plenty of batteries. I'm flying a 4S1000 on this first flight. And I'm just feeling the yaw out right here. Feels really, really snappy. Really nice response. The throttle response is pretty good. I feel a little bit of wander there on the yaw axis when I did an inverted flip. And that does happen even on some of the bind and fly quads that you'd buy that are ready to go and just bind up with your transmitter. Still doing really, really well, tracking really well. My lines are nice and straight. Coming around through that long run there and doing a nice big loop. Sweet. Again, tracking really, really well. I trust this quad a lot, even taking some really close chances right there. Coming back around, back under the trees, in between the trees here, underneath. Y'all snap right around the tree right here. And man, this thing is flying sweet. So I know that it flies really, really awesome. Close in proximity. The Birdbone is kicking ass. And it's really fast. It's insanely fast. So after all of that, after one battery of just really ripping around, I wanted to see just some pure, simplistic flying with this. If you're just getting into quadcopters and you want to see how this thing flies without me really ripping on the throttle, this is kind of an example of that. If you just want to go out there and cruise, you can also do that too. And I've got the GoPro Session on top of it, so it is capable of carrying GoPro Session. And all I have is a piece of foam on there, a few pieces of Velcro, top and bottom, and then a battery strap around the GoPro Session. And I've got a TPU mount around the GoPro Session, holding it in place with the strap through the TPU mount. And this is about what you can expect, which is looking pretty good. There's a little bit of jello there, to be honest. But if you're on a budget, again, this is really easy to do. You can get the parts for these pretty cheap. Again, I'm just sort of doing some close-in, low-to-the-ground proximity stuff around the trees. And I really like the way this flies, so I did bang it up quite a bit out in the field. Honestly, I did chip the very end of one of the arms, and the motor came loose. And that's because I needed to put some washers underneath my bolts. So if you don't put some washers up inside there, it might crack the motor bolt through the frame a little bit if you have a really hard crash. But I really threw this thing into the ground really hard. It bounced and cartwheeled across the grass, so a really hard crash is going to probably do that. But I also printed this in the more brittle PETG, and my next frame will be out of ABS for sure. But I'm really, really happy with the way this came out. I think this is probably one of the best flying 3D printed FPV race quads that I've had my hands on, and maybe even out there on YouTube right now. This is a really exceptional build and print. I'm really, really happy with this Birdbone. So check out the forums on Facebook also, because they do have some forums that are super deep, and everybody's talking about the Birdbone right now. I just want to give a shout out to the creator of that. You will see him in the forums, and he might answer your questions about it. He's giving away this model for free. So let's go ahead into the studio and check out the Alfawise U20. I think you guys are going to like that. I had some fun out in the field. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with the honest review of the Alfawise U20. Is it something that's comparable to the Creality CR10S? I think so, for about $300 definitely. Now it does have the same build volume size as the CR10S. You're going to be able to build 300 by 300 by 400 millimeters. And 400 millimeters is actually pretty tall. You can print all kinds of really cool stuff off of thingiverse.com, like vases and other super tall sculptures. But let's talk about the stand for the filament that comes along with it. This is not a good stand. I really don't like the way this is built. It feels really chintzy. And if I can be honest, I had an issue with this stand where it fell over while I was doing a print in the middle of the night. And I purposely stayed up late to be able to watch over this printer during my 5-hour print. I didn't want to come to a complete catastrophe in the morning, because whenever you have a new printer, it's good to stick by it when you're doing a print. This is really wobbly. It does not have any rubber supports on the bottom, and that little middle piece always falls out. It drives me crazy. So in my opinion, the steel style stands are way better. This is just really hard and kind of awkward to deal with. Putting this in that little slot right there while you have the weight of the filament roll, it's just not good. And it really does slide around a lot. It needs rubber bumpers on the bottom of it. I would probably take some Gorilla Tape and tape this baby down to the top of that if you're going to be printing, because it will fall over and you're going to have a giant catastrophe if you walk away from this printer. So get a metal stand, and honestly, even with a metal stand, I use Gorilla Tape to tape it down just so it didn't slide off the top of this and have another disaster. But that'll hold it nice and solid if you want to do some long prints and you don't want to worry about it falling over. Now, filaments are great on this. You have several different types of filaments that will print. It will definitely do PLA all day long. It did well. It will also print TPU, and I had some good luck with printing some GoPro mounts with my TPU without any type of mods on mine. And I was able to print the wood filament from Hatchbox, also one of my favorites. You can sand this stuff and make sort of like kids' toys out of it, which is really awesome. It's a nice grade PLA wood filament, and you can print the super high temp ABS on this printer, but you will need to use the glue stick so that it doesn't warp on you, which I found out with the PETG as well. You have to use the glue stick to make the PEG stick and not warp up off the print bed. But I did a pretty good print with the quadcopter with this stuff, and I'm pretty happy with it and the way it came out. Now, the build surface is glass, and it does have some sort of build tack style material on the top, but you will have to use the glue stick on here to get stuff to stick. If you're printing anything larger, like I said, you need to put down the glue stick, let it dry, and once it's dry, you can go ahead and start your print. Otherwise, you're going to have a failure for your print. It's just going to pop off or it's going to warp. And so far, I'm impressed with the quality. It has really nice feet that hold it still while you're printing, and there's not a lot of slop in the hot plate, so that's really nice. And the hot end as well, there's not a lot of slop here with the wheels. Sometimes these come loose and I have to tighten them up. Everything is labeled here, so when you go to build this, it's actually pretty easy to build. Not a lot of confusion there on where things plug in and where things go, which was really nice. And back here as well, there's also labels back here for your Y-axis motor, which is really great and really easy to put together overall. What is really cool about the Alfawise U20 is the screen that comes along with it is flat mount, and it's LED. So you have a full color screen, touch screen here on the Alfawise U20, which is really nice. I love that it's flat right here. It is different than the CR10S, where it has a little bit of a curve, but it's easier to see this one in the box. If you're using an enclosure, that's going to be a big advantage versus the Alfawise being flat. If it's flat like this, I can't really see it in my enclosure, so that was one issue that I did have. Now in the back right here, just make sure all your cables are seated. The power button is right there. And this is what the load screen looks like turning on. But let's go ahead and take a look at the interface. This is where it gets really nice. It is way different than the CR10, probably a little more user-friendly, but you're going to have to figure out how to heat things up. Right here, this is the way you start the heat up process. If I tap this a bunch of times, I can go ahead and raise the hot end right here just by keep tapping, and I can go all the way up to 180. That's so you can get your filament in and out, or I can go back down. And the same thing with the bed right here. This is going to raise it up. If I just tap that, if you hold it, it doesn't actually work. So you have some other things like raise and lower right there on that side, which is nice. You have that option. This heats up really, really fast, which I love. You have auto feed in right there. You can stop it, or you can do auto feed out. And I'm not a really big fan of the auto feed, honestly. I always like to do it manually. Just push it through by hand by holding that extruder spring on the back side of the printer and feed it in. And I heat it up here first, and that just lets me push it through, and you'll see some squeeze out the tip, and you'll be ready to start printing. You can also preheat the bed using this method right here, which is kind of nice. So let's go ahead and back out of this, and let's check out the movement tab right there. Now we can home the printer on two different axes right here. We can do it on the X and the Y, or the Z, which is cool. You have a lock button there, and we can do incremental movements with those. And let's go ahead and press the X and Y button right there, and it's going to come back to the X and Y. And now why this is cool, because if I want to do some extrusion on the hot tip right there, I just want to bring some filament through, push it through and get it ready for the print, I can do that. And then when I'm ready to do my print, I can home the Z-axis and bring it down to the bed level, which is really, really cool that it does have that option. The CR10 does not have that option, by the way. Now this has a 4-point leveling system on here. It does not level in the middle, which is kind of strange, but it does do top left, top right, and bottom left. So the hot end's going to move around, and you can also unlock or lock the X and Y axis, which is kind of nice. Kind of strange that it does not have a center point sort of leveling option, but once you get those 4 corners level just by using these little sort of twist spring action levelers, this is how you do it by hand, and this is kind of honestly the way I like to do it myself. It's kind of what I'm used to. So I'm going to go back there, and let's check out the SD card option. Once your SD card is in, you can click on folder, and this is where you're going to navigate your files. They should be saved as G-code out of your slicer. This is where your SD card goes, just on the side right there. Just pushes in and springs into place. Now I can scroll through everything on the micro SD card. And here you can see there's 2 types of files. These are my custom files that I brought in from my Simplify 3D, and it's going to be the file on top. So it's going to be the first one, not the one with the period. Then you're going to press print, and you're going to say yes. You can press check there, and you can see the file name, which I really, really like. You have your extrusion and bed temperatures there. You have also that you're printing, and the cool thing about this is that the bed heats up super fast, probably in just a few minutes time, and you're already starting to print. This is much better than the much larger printers that take an upwards of 20 minutes or so. You also have controls in here on the fly. You can change the extrusion, the bed, the speed, and the fan, which is really nice. Or you can pause the print, or you can stop it right there. We're just going to press stop, and we're going to end that print. But a really nice, easy to use, intuitive screen comes along with the Alfawise U20. And also super important, if you're in the US, make sure you put it on 110 there. It's kind of strange, it does say 115 there, but make sure that you back it over to the left if you're in the US. Now also you have a USB port if you decide to print from your slicer software straight to this. You can do that from your PC. I don't believe it works with the Mac, so it didn't work with mine. But what I really like about this printer also, the CR10S does not have a metal part extrusion head. This is all metal parts right here, which is really, really nice. And they also have sort of a filament sensor on there. And this is a Bowden style extruder, so once you put in your filament here, it's going to run through here and all the way down to the hot end. And as you're pushing it in, if you're doing it manually, you want to see it come out the tip of the hot end and just wipe it off before your print. And you also have a nice glass plate with an aluminum bed underneath here. You got 4 clips that come along with it. And when you're removing your prints, I always take the glass bed off and I set it over to the side of the printer. You can see that little aluminum plate there, which is why it heats up really nice and fast, but really nice glass plate. And you're just going to go ahead and set that down on another surface and remove your print. These are the accessories that come along with it. You get some PLA for your test prints, and you do get some zip ties, and you get this paint scraper for removing your prints. But this one has kind of a dull edge. It's flat on the end of it, so it's not really sharpened. If you want to go to the paint store, you can find one that has a sharpened edge. Will be much better for removing your prints. You also get some Allen wrenches here, and that's for building your printer. And you get snips. You get some extra wrenches, a screwdriver, and this little tool removes any clogs from the hot end. A USB cord there, and this is for putting in your computer with your micro SD card in it, and you can load up your STL files or your G-code files onto this, then pop it out and put your micro SD card into the printer. And I'll just take it out and show you right here. It is an 8 GB micro SD card that came along with the Alfawise U20, which is super great because this will hold a lot of G-code files. Tons of files you can save on here. You can make extra folders and save library of all kinds of stuff right here on this little card. Now they also have some 3D printed parts on here, which I've seen on some of even the Creality printers. You only have one Z-axis extruder motor. So unlike the upgraded CR10s, those had dual extruders on them. This one only has one, but the quality of this is looking pretty decent here. You look on the bottom right here, all the hardware looks really nice. It doesn't look super chintzy under here like some of the other names of other printers. I'm not going to name names, but you know who you guys are. So the quality looks pretty decent. And let's check out my print samples. This is the first one that I did, and this is the DNA Helix. This thing looks amazing. Hardly any stringing on the top. There's one little tiny piece right there, but look at that. It's almost magic the way this printer printed this. It was really, really nicely done, and this was my first impression of this printer. So a very, very nice first print. And my next print was the Bullet, and this was on the micro SD card, but check out what happened here. I'm not sure what happened when it decided to step in and do the very top of the Bullet, because it seems like it missed a layer and then just went totally wild on the end right there. Just look on the end right there, it's almost hollow. Yeah, a very strange print. And so I moved on to the next thing on the card, which was the Heart. I decided to print this, but this also had an issue. I had some layer separation there, and when I came into the room to check on it, it was printing in mid-air. So one strange phenomena right there. It might have actually been a clogged extruder tip, which does happen from time to time. So I got back on the horse, and I was able to get this print out of the Heart with all the ventricles there. Everything looks really good. There's some space in between some of the ventricles. Really neat looking there that it was able to do that. So it is showing that it does have some pretty good control on printing these models. Now I'm just going to zoom in a little bit closer so you guys can see the surface texture of this. See if there's not a lot of banding, which is kind of amazing. This looks really, really smooth and really, really nice. So my impression of the 3D printer is definitely growing at this point. This looks really, really good. So with my confidence at an all-time high, at this point I decided to print the Dragon Cup that's on the SD card, and man was I impressed with this. Check out the detail and the level of intricacy with this print. This is a pen holder for your desk, but I did notice one line through the very middle. It did have a little bit of separation there, and I don't know if that's the print file or the printer messing up, but I believe it's the printer messing up, because I'm going to show you what happened here. And this is where I figured out that I needed to use the glue stick. You see the very bottom right here? It's warped. It looks pretty good on the inside right there, but we do have some warping on the bottom, and I believe that's what caused this print to have that separation in that middle right there. If it hadn't separated, this would have been an absolutely perfect print. So I'm kind of bummed that I did have a little bit of warping there on this PLA print. So definitely use the glue stick on your larger prints, and you won't have any problem with warping or separation. And moving on to the next quadcopter, this was by a friend of mine online. Kamir, he did a really nice multiple layer micro quad, and this one's called the X129R Monster Whoop. It has detachable arms on here, so if you break one arm you can replace that just by printing that one half. And the reason I did this one first is because that smaller quad just takes a lot less time to print, and it's a lot less to kind of commit to in the early stages of working with a 3D printer. So this was a perfect size 120mm replaceable arm quadcopter with two different top plates, so you can put the camera up top or down bottom. And I'll try to put the link down below for him, because he has a really awesome frame kit, and all of these parts are offered for free on Thingiverse, and I'll try to make sure I have the correct link. But check out this quality a little bit closer up. You can see this looks pretty solid, and this is just PLA. If you're going to print this, I would definitely do it in ABS. It's going to be a lot stronger, and you're going to have a pretty nice quadcopter, and a lot of updates from Kamir for this particular quad. It's a super awesome quad. Now we're moving on to the full-size quadcopter. This is the bed that came along with it. This was the raft, actually, the first part of it that I peeled off from the bottom of the Birdbone. Now this quad is called the Birdbone, and it's designed by a guy named Eric Camellia. So I want to give a shout out to Eric. I think he did an exceptional job with this design. It is the most impeccable, awesome flying 3D printed FPV racer I've had my hands on and flown personally. So huge thumbs up. Eric also offers this frame for about $40 if you decide you wanted to buy this. If you don't have a 3D printer if you want to get this kit. I did have some damage to mine, but he's going to print his in ABS, which is going to be way stronger than my PETG model right here. I love this bottom plate. It's super thick. The coolest thing about this was that it was super easy to build, and only 4 parts total. It's awesome. So a really easy model to build, and really lightweight, super lightweight actually. And for my build, other guys are using larger motors, but I use the 1806 2500 kVs. These are like King Kong motors, LDARC. You can get these. I'll try to put a link down below for these and some props, the camera, and a type of flight controller that I go for. I used a 20x20 stack with my VTX right on the very top, and I use a little tiny sort of a D8 style receiver. I've got some standoffs in there, just some standoff posts on the back, and you have options on here for top mount battery or a GoPro up here, and you can also put your battery down bottom on the very bottom, which I really love. But I think he has a real winner here for this design frame. Plenty of protection for the camera there. There's a little bit hanging out on the bottom. Maybe he could extend that bottom piece a little bit, but from the top, it looks like we got plenty of protection if you're going in from a forward angle. But what an attractive style quadcopter. You can check out their 3D printing group. It's on 3D Printing Homegrown Drones on Facebook. Now look at the bottom of this. This is where it gets really cool. I love this. You have your 4 posts on the outside edges right here, and 3 options for mounting your flight controllers or mini stacks. You got that middle stack there, and you have 2 front and back. So run your screws through there, and you can do a sort of a run cam split mini. 3 different mounting options on this is really awesome. So thumbs up, Eric. Really kick-ass design. So hopefully this video inspired you to print some 3D race drones and take a chance on a 3D printer. Get yourself one. If it's not the Alfawise U20, get something else. Just make sure that it's going to print ABS and PETG and nylon. You want to be able to print those 3 main ones, and TPU. I'm just going to go ahead and set this on the scale. 190 grams. That's under 200 grams for 4-inch race quad. That is pretty awesome. Really, really lightweight. So let's go ahead and summarize this review. I think it's great that it does print all these different types of filaments. This is a really good value for under $300 right now. It's kind of insane because you can print out quads with it, quad parts, TPU mounts, and all that cool stuff. If you are a race pilot, this is going to be awesome for you. I think that's a great value, and you can just experiment with this a little bit. So you will have to use the glue stick on this. You can rip that off and put some build tack down, but I would just leave it the way it is. Thumbs up for pretty much everything on this printer. I didn't have a lot of problems, which is a big change for me. I've had some issues with other printers recently, and I'm pretty happy with the way this came out. But thanks again for watching another honest review, guys. I'm Justin Davis. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.